of Selectmen for fiscal year 2017. I'm going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. I'm going to ask our first Selectman to lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For a minute there, I thought Mr. Mayor had been elected first Selectman.
I was hearing that coming behind me.
I thought you were throwing your voice.
All right.
Hi, Mayor.
I'm just really patriotic. I love my country.
As
One of the
well
few
you
times
should
I
be.
control what he says. Yeah.
This is true. This is true. He stuck to the script. All right. Tonight we have the administrative and general departments, everything from the Board of Selectmen through the Town Clerk, Fair TV, all the way down through Harbor Management. We do have some travel schedules that conflicted with the meeting tonight and one illness, though I'm told that our members will be able to watch it on Fair TV, either live or tape delay. So I would expect that there might be some questions that come out of their perusing this tape later on. Before we get to the agenda, are there any questions, comments, concerns on the process or on follow-up items from board members, either from the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Mayor, any communications we need to speak of at this time?
None. Nothing received. Just there's a few follow-up documents that we've not been able to get out to you, like with respect to the DPW. But we're working on those with the DPW. That's with the water treatment, the transfer station and the outside services versus the salaries. We'll get those out this week, at least one of them. And we did start working today on the issue that came up last night regarding the categorization of accounts.
Great, thank you very much. All right, with that, we'll start the budget process this evening. We'll go to the first Selectman's office, and that is on page 77. The numbers are on 78 and 79. Mr. Tetro, any comments you'd like to make here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the most part, it's pretty straightforward. There is one large adjustment we did have last year in the budget, a $100,000 item for the strategic plan. That is not replicated in this year's budget, so you'll see a significant drop in that line item.
Okay.
We do plan on utilizing those funds before the end of this year, and we'll be getting the strategic plan process off and started over the next month.
Thank you, Mr. Tetro. Do we have any questions from board members on the First Selectman's Office budget? Again, this is going down by 19%, largely because of that $100,000 item for the strategic plan. Questions, comments, concerns on this department? Mr. Becker.
Thank you. Just there's like a receptionist or some sort of support there. Where is that housed? I remember there was a split, but I didn't
Believe
see
that-
it within your budget.
That has historically been housed in administrative services. They were on the first floor. I think 2 years ago, we moved them up to the First Selectman's office to provide better security for them in the First Selectman's office, as well as utilizing the two part-timers that are there on a more regular basis, so we're getting more production, more work out of them in between their reception duties.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks.
I do have a question, and I hesitate to ask it because I don't want it being read into, but I want to better understand the organizational structure, and are there people that report to the Chief of Staff, and what is he working on? Because we don't see him that often at this meeting, so I just want to understand what he's working on and who's reporting to who and the org chart, because I don't know at the present point in time.
Yeah, I would say we kind of share Kathleen and Jen from that regard in terms of what work, and they share work. The team between the receptionist and Kathleen and Jen share the work based on workloads that change and fluctuate on what's going through and based on where people are. That my Chief of Staff, Mr. Dabrowski, works on several key areas. One is on following up on customer responses,
On what?
customer questions, issues, responses from the town to residents that either need help working on an issue, be it a neighborhood group worrying about speeding. We've had several issues of that, where we help them follow through the process.
Okay.
He also helps me in terms of, as we meet with different neighbors or residents, in terms of the follow-up that needs to be done after that. He will very often represent the town or myself at different meetings if a schedule conflict keeps me from being there, so we don't hold up the process and the town is properly represented. In addition, he's been working with department heads on their goals and their planning process and kind of improving our skills in that area. So
Okay.
that the best way I can say that is it's made a big difference in my workload and being able to get back. One of our goals is to make sure when a resident inquires at our office that we're back to them in 24 hours. Obviously not with a solution in all cases, but so the resident knows that they have been heard and how their call is going to be handled. He's worked with our Q Alert system specifically in helping get our department heads and our various departments to use that. Q Alert is the constituent response system we have. It's on the website as well as a call. We are, for the last 2 years, have been using that to manage our response and to make sure that we have a response as well as a tracking history for any calls, issues, questions, or complaints that come in to our, actually the entire town, but certainly our office is included as part of that.
Is he part of the interview process for any of the new department head positions?
Not in the 2 or 3 that we're looking at currently, but he has been involved in the past.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tetra.
Oh,
Any
as well
other-
as, I should mention, as didn't come through this board, but it was discussed at other boards, he's currently a member of the Holland Hill Building Committee.
Okay. Oh, I remember. Thank you. Any other questions from board members on the First Selectman's budget? Thank you, sir. Seeing none, we'll go to the town clerk's budget. Good evening, Mrs. Brown. Welcome. Can we start with revenue on page 51 for the town clerk's budget? First of all, as we always ask, Mrs. Brown, are you comfortable with the revenue assumptions in this budget going forward for next year?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and they're all based on estimates. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's driving them, you or Mr. Mayor? Largely on the conveyance. That's, you have it roughly flat year over year, is that correct?
Right now, we're at 1.2 million. Close of business last week, we're at 1.25. So we're doing quite well with conveyance.
Okay, so
For
we're,
this, that's for current year.
right. And next year, we have it going up only by 50,000, as I can tell. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor?
Correct.
Do we, you don't think there's any room there, given where we are this year, as of right now? Because aren't we coming into a big time, or no?
I leave those decisions to the department heads who I feel have more knowledge on the subject than I do.
Mrs. Brown, do you think we have any room there?
It's basically volume of the smaller sales. We're not
Yeah.
getting the huge sales like we used to, but it's just our volume is doing quite well.
Yeah, okay, so you're ahead this year. You'll probably beat the 1,550 now?
Yeah,
Because
that's
of
why
seasonality?
Yes, that's why I put it up to 1.6 for next year.
So you're comfortable, so are you comfortable raising it any more than the 1.6?
Right now, I hedge my bet saying no, but
Okay, but we can track that for another couple weeks, right? and see if-
Absolutely. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have other questions on revenue in this in this area?
everything else is basically, it's the state fees. So-
Right, right. Mr. Timniak,
I was
did
going
you?
to ask about, I was going to ask the same questions Tom just asked about the conveyance tax, and then I was going to also talk about the recording fees. The 3-year average I saw is 302,000, and we're budgeting this year for 250,000 in recording fees. Is that 50,000 short of what our average is?
There was a new legislation that went into effect last year regarding MERS mortgages, and we don't get the piece that used to come back to the town. If there's a MERS mortgage, the state of Connecticut is getting that money. So that's where it fell off.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Mr. Mayor, can we get a follow-up item to see where we stand on the conveyance? And Mrs. Brown, if you could just
Absolutely.
give us a heads up, we'd appreciate it. Let's go to page 80 and 81. 81 is the numbers for the town clerk's office on expense side. Do you have anything you want to say, Bets, to start?
Regular payroll increased because it's contractual. As far as maintenance and repair of equipment, we have finally got rid of the map machine, and we were able to reduce that line. I cut my printing a little bit. We have a new vendor, and we'll be able to do more things more efficiently. That's about it.
Okay, and fees and professional services, I'm sorry, did you say something about that?
That was contractual, the increase. We have a new software program, and it's our maintenance beyond that.
Got it. Any other questions, comments, concerns? This budget's going up less than 2%, driven largely by salary and contractual. Anybody have anything? Seeing none, thank you.
Have a good evening.
You as well. And now we're going to page 83, which is Fair TV. Good evening.
Hello.
Can you please just introduce yourselves for the record?
Yes, I'm McKay Jemison. I'm the chair of the Fair TV Commission.
Tracy Minsky, Vice Chair, Fair TV Commission.
Welcome to you both. Thanks for being here tonight. Do you have anything you'd like to say before we jump into this budget?
I think I'd just like to start by thanking you for the plug at the beginning of this meeting that it can be watched on Fair TV.
We do that all the time.
Yeah, I hope so. As leaders of this town, I hope you all do.
If you could use a slimming camera, that'd be really appreciated as well.
We need some innovative technology to
Go right ahead. Do you have anything else you'd like to say regarding the budget?
So I'll just make, not necessarily in regards to the budget, I'm going to lay out some general themes for Fair TV because I think it's going to be important moving forward. This is still a relatively new commission. If those recall, there was a committee that was set up prior to this commission, but we really came into effect in August. And in the first part, or in the last half of the year, I think it took some time for us to understand the operations of Fair TV, but we have a decent grasp of those today. We've also made some improvements to the services by offering both live streaming as well as being able to access Fair TV on your mobile devices. We did invest in some equipment upgrades and some needed cameras. But moving forward, I think there are some large themes that we'll need to look at as a commission that I think are somewhat reflected in this budget today. I think the first is involving the uncertainty around our grant funding from the Cable Advisory Council. We will get funding, but we have to go through a regular application process. We are not given funding based off of the money that is generated from residents of the town of Fairfield through their fees, their cable fees.
How much is that grant right now? Remind us.
Last year, we were funded around $25,000 between both education and government channels. Feedback from the CAC2 was because they viewed us as a startup, they treated us kindly. So we're hopeful for around $20,000 again this year, but we're not guaranteed that money, and we won't know until later this summer.
Okay.
And then just two other things are, Fair TV is seeing an increase in demand, which is a very good problem to have. We're frequently finding ourselves in a position where we have to decline coverage because we simply just don't have the human resources to cover events. And so I think we do need to look at how we allocate those resources. And then even though we as a commission are relatively new and a startup, a lot of the equipment is aging, and we've seen this year a number of equipment malfunctions that we do have a plan in place to improve the maintenance, and we are going to have to refresh some equipment. So, but those are the main challenges for Fair TV. I think for this particular commission, as we move forward and really build a strategic plan, it's going to center around a couple of things. The first is going to be really improving our financial certainty and our financial independence. We did ask for an increase, a modest increase from the town this year. That's not my preference. It was more a reality of the situation that we're dealing with, but we need to establish a third or fourth stream of income that would probably come from a new source that we don't currently have today, possibly through fundraising. We're exploring our opportunities there. Number two is I think we need to expand our resource pool and capability so we can have more engaging content. You know, the reality is Fair TV is Fairfield Station, and it should be representative of the interests of the residents of Fairfield, along with being a record and a window into what happens in government within the town. And then finally, really focusing on investing technology. And our grant funding, we're really looking at that as an innovation fund, almost to continue the equipment investment, the improvements in technology, so that we can have a better service that's more accessible to the residents of the town.
Before I turn it over to board members, the biggest complaint that I hear is the sound quality and the ability to actually hear what's being said at the meetings. Is there anything that's in the works to be done to improve that?
So we've looked into this. It's a problem that we hear quite a bit as well, and it's something that we're concerned about. We've checked the quality of the sound on our end, and it's really high quality. So this either means that there's something on the transmission with the cable, through the cable providers that's not working, or and I do think this is the case in certain places. You know, some people aren't accustomed to using microphones, so I think when you sort of stand away, it does create a little bit of an issue. There's no immediate solution to this beyond, you know, continuing to try to, I think, encourage good microphone placement at meetings. I think there's a few ideas that maybe we could possibly mic up people, but there's a cost associated with that we would have to go through.
You might be the first person I ever heard say a politician doesn't know how to use a microphone. All right, so, but things are being looked at to improve the quality of that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we went through, in our first 2 months as a commission, we did an operational audit to really understand our strengths and weaknesses, and that, as well as improving the accessibility online, is a top priority for us.
Okay, thank you. Board members, questions for Fair TV? Mr. Walsh?
Speaking of sound quality, I get a number of questions from people, and then when they're watching it at home, sometimes they say that there's a bleeding through of like another channel. Has anybody addressed that issue? And I've talked to Jerry about it, and Jerry says that he's heard that too. So I just didn't know whether, it almost sounds like there's another channel bleeding through in the background.
Well, the education and government?
I primarily watch government, so, and that's, people just say Fair TV when they talk to me, so that I'm sure some of them are education advocates as well, so.
You're only watching the meetings you're in?
No, thanks for the feedback.
I'm highly more critical that way.
I wasn't aware of
All
that
of us.
issue, so it's something we can follow up with Jerry on as well and understand what the source could be. You know, one of the nice things about the members of our commission is we have one individual in particular who's really savvy on the technical side. It's his profession as well, so maybe it's something we'll ask him to look into as well. I haven't heard
It
of
might
that
be on the
before.
cable TV side, I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
thanks for
something like
pointing
that.
it out.
And I walked in a little late on your thing. Is there any talk about going to high definition?
Well, there's certainly
all look so good, it would look better.
There's certainly talk about it. There's certainly talk about it, and yes, we would love to go to high definition. The real challenge with high definition, though, is that the cable, regardless of whether or not we go to high definition as Fair TV, what you get on the cable channel won't change. The cable providers will not offer our service in high definition. Okay. That's the bottom line. Now, the reality is, because everything's moving digital, that is the future of Fair TV, right? And I think we need to assess whether having a high def for internet quality properties is appropriate. So it's something that we're certainly looking into and exploring, and it's frankly a big challenge for us because it's hard to actually get standard definition equipment anymore. Mm-hmm. So we have to really find the right deals on the right equipment to actually meet the needs of the cable providers.
Thank you.
Sir Hopkins. And he's got his nameplate today.
Thank you. You said earlier you may need a refresh of equipment sometime. Do you have any idea when you think that might be?
It's going to be ongoing. We started this year with some additional cameras. I think we also want to work closely with the town to understand, looking at meeting space to see if possibly we could equip some of the meeting rooms also with cameras. And I should actually add, too, that one of the benefits of going through this budget process, it was new for us the first time, and I got to credit the first selectman. He asked us some very direct and good questions that I think helped focus us on where we should be taking Fair TV and where we should be focusing our attention. We need to look at upgrading our servers. We need to, most of it's just maintenance. These things are 7 years old, and some of those bills will start hitting this year, and they will stagger. And it's also, we're at max capacity in terms of the services we can offer today, so if we want to expand coverage, we have to look to also expand our number of cameras, also expand our labor pool as well to support that, and find a place to store the equipment.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure that what you've got is an ongoing refresh of equipment, and it's not just going to be, in a couple of years, you're going to need a big lump sum to refresh everything at one time.
No, it's a great point. It's something that's top of mind for this commission, and I think we fully intend to not only focus on having annual investments in new technology, but also make sure that we have a really solid maintenance plan so that we're able to address server issues and things like that before it becomes a problem.
All right, thank you.
Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. In your FY 14-15 budget, you were budgeted $49,000, but yet you only spent $24,000, less than 50%. You're currently underspending for the year at 60%. So why is a almost 11% increase from a budget that you don't look like you're going to spend this year the right number?
Well, these numbers are from December, so they may be a slightly dated.
I have the numbers. I have your numbers today, from today.
I'd-
From March, sorry.
I would have to take a look at those. I mean, are you sure that's not combined grant and town funding?
It's whatever's in Munis, 62% spent as of March 1st.
I would have to take a look at it. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but what I can tell you is the way that we currently have been operating Fair TV historically is heavily reliant on the grant. And the intention of the grant is to cover equipment fees and costs, not labor costs. And one of the things that we're focused on is making sure that we're funding our labor costs out of, basically, if it's a town, if we're covering a town event, we want that funding to come out of the town budget. So that's part of the reason for the increase this year, as well as the focus on accommodating some additional covers. For example, the RTM asked us to start covering their committee meetings, and we, in this month, actually, we're going to start a 3-month pilot on covering those committee meetings, and if it's a format that works and we have the finances to do it, we'll continue to cover those meetings. So part of that is a reflection of expansion and coverage.
Okay. There's a new line item this year, special departmental supplies, that wasn't in last year's book. What is that, $1,000?
So that is, we have regular maintenance that's not the right. We have costs that are routine, whether it's going to Home Depot and getting tape for equipment, or mileage, or things like that that we have to sometimes pay the labor. Again, I think that's something that historically we've paid out of the grants that we're trying to move over to the more appropriate fund.
So, and I understand the CAC grant, we talked about this quite a lot last year, and how this is not a guaranteed grant any longer. So if we approve the budget as funded and you get the grant, do you return money to the general fund? Or because your budget is not based on the fact you're going to get a grant at this point, is that correct?
It is.
It is?
Yeah, it is. It is. It would cover, I mean, so let's say we get $20,000. The cost for us to get a new server is going to be roughly $12,000 to $13,000.
So if you don't get the grant, you don't get the server, is that pretty much it?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Tetra?
Just two things. You talked about looking forward. Now, we talked about the idea of putting together a 5-year plan, and I know you started making some progress on that based on our discussion in January. Where does that look at this point, and to give all of us kind of a better look at what the future holds?
Yeah, I'm happy to share some of the details. We don't have a formal 5-year plan currently in place, but we have agreed as a commission on an outline, and it covers, I think, in terms of the 3 main goals, what I outlined earlier, which is the sustainable and financial independence, really having the engaging content and the investment in technology. Within those, under financial independence, it's really diversifying our funding and trying to find new sources of income. We want to apply for the state PEG-PESHA grant, but under the current budget situation, that money's not currently available, but we need to put an application in so that when it is available, we can receive that money. And then also make sure that we're getting as much of what Fairfield residents put into the CAC grant back to Fairfield as we possibly can. And so that's why, we're going to try to ask for certainly the money that's needed, but I think also the money that Fairfield puts into the pot to make sure that we're generating as much value for Fairfield residents as we possibly can. And then I think we also need to explore what additional partnerships may be available, either community-based partnerships or looking at broader NGOs possibly that may have grants that could be available or could be partners. Looking at the content, one of the things that really amazed me when I joined Fair TV was that there is no measurement today. So I cannot tell you how many people watch Fair TV, and we'll never get the ratings from the cable providers. But I do think there is potential for us through digital analytics to start to better measure that. So finding a way to measure that is a priority. We have to consolidate our domains first to do that. We've talked a little bit about expanding coverage. Which is both, I think, expanding our coverage within the government meetings, but I think we're also looking to be better partners with the schools. For example, we've had a couple of requests that we're pretty excited about, where we could work with the schools to engage students and help the students play a role in learning how to use the equipment to cover plays, sporting events, things of that nature. And then finally, I think we want to stay on the path of continuing to invest on the digital side, make sure that we have an incredibly accessible website that people, whether you're a commuter, the cable channel is going to be there. That I know a lot of people value that, but I think there's a lot of people that more and more want to be able to use their mobile devices, and making sure that we have the equipment to be able to provide a service.
You've talked about some of the issues with your hardware. Do you have a hardware replacement plan in place looking at the next few years, so you know where?
So one of our members has done an assessment with Jerry, and they have a maintenance plan, but the reality is, because of the age of our equipment, we're going to have to start to look to replace that, and actually at our next meeting, we're going to look at that list, I believe.
Okay, well, I think that would be helpful to both boards in terms of getting a feel for what your plans are going forward. Along those lines, you've also started some discussions with Sacred Heart and potentially getting access to some of their brand new and state-of-the-art facilities. What are you projecting there?
We did. Tracy, you want to talk about that?
Thank you. We recently were over there. I went there along with another member, and we just started a conversation. In fact, our commission is meeting next week, so we can really explain further what has happened. But they were very open to potentially working with our commission, seeing what options there are. One thing they mentioned is maybe, though we're not sure yet, they may have some equipment that they could share with us if their students have outgrown it, or it's a little bit older for them, but may still work for us. We want to see what that is. Also potentially having an internship. Maybe some of the students could join us and help us with some of the manpower. But the other thing would be for us to be able to use their facilities, whether it be for events for the commission, for the town, for the commission to tape, whether it be for even meetings. We'll see. The potential is great. They have a state-of-the-art facility with everything you could think of, every bell and whistle that we could only hope for. So I think the discussion is there. We certainly know the contacts, and we certainly want to get the discussion continue to see how it could work for the commission, but really help the whole town.
Yeah. I think that's very exciting, both in terms of building the bonds with Sacred Heart, I know you went up there with Mr. Dabrowski, and he's got a good relationship up there. And I think that would be great, both for you, but also for Sacred Heart in terms of getting them more involved in our community. So I look forward to seeing your progress on that.
Likewise.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments, Mr. Becker?
So on the, you mentioned the servers. I know that some communities host a lot of their meetings, like the recorded ones, online, and it seems like one of the things with the platform that we have now is, you know, at least I've noticed, like, you have to download Silverlight now, which is still kind of not a particularly popular, it's rather cumbersome, you know, it's not where things are headed. Are you guys trying to get to a point where that goes, and maybe when we talk servers, we can maybe talk cloud? I mean, there's definitely, like, one of the issues seems to be, like, from a space perspective, that if you need something, I know, like, sometimes we want to review a meeting from a year or two ago, you can email Jerry. Now, I'm not sure the public necessarily knows you can do that, but you can, and he'll put it up there and you can get to it, but the window is sort of narrowing, especially as there's more and more programming as to how much is up there, too. So is there sort of, what are your thoughts on it? What kind of expense really is that? I mean, I view Fair TV, I mean, obviously we want to get as much as we can grant side. I think it's great that you're looking at potentially other grants or partnerships, things like that. We don't want to go nuts, you know, with the budget, but Fair TV has changed the dynamic in the engagement in this town with such a small amount of money, and it's huge. So, you know, I'm supportive, but I want to make sure that we're really kind of getting out there. So
Yeah, thanks. Well, first, thanks for the feedback. I really appreciate you saying that and recognizing the value that we're providing. I think there's really two questions in this. I think the first is around archiving, and the second, I think, is about the the digital access, right? I think in terms of the archiving, storage is a challenge for us, as it is anybody who has to maintain large records. And I think we're now to a position, and we've started to discuss this in some of our meetings, though have not come to a resolution just yet, in terms of how we can best house the archives of Fair TV, because we do think that, in addition to providing transparency, we are an archive. One of our big ideas is to see if we can partner with the library so that people can access those through the library, and also in partnership with the library to see if maybe we can work in a way that also creates content and programming that is happening at the library, so that we are all winning across the board. Your point in terms of the digital platform, this is a hot button for me. In full candor, I'm not satisfied with it yet. I think we've made some progress in terms of what we're offering today, but we have a long way to go, and I think it's something that over the next 12 months, we as a commission are going to have to take a serious look to make sure that we're really tapping the best resources that are available, you know, within Fair TV or beyond, to make sure that we are offering the highest performing service. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Couple things. Number one, in terms of your audience, you know, and what your viewers are, I can only tell you, based on how many people come up to me, that you're getting a lot of viewers. There's a lot of feedback when you're in town or in a store or something, somebody saw a meeting and has a question, and I think that is invaluable. One of the things I've noticed, so I've been on this board now for over 10 years. We used to hold these budget hearings, and there used to be members of the print media here, several members of the print media here every night. And due to the economics that has impacted that industry, it's just not feasible for them to have representatives here all the time. And so the ability for you guys to bring these meetings and the other meetings from the town bodies to the general public is invaluable, particularly since it's unfiltered, and they can just see how the sausage is made. So that's really good. I would strongly encourage, following up on something Mr. Tetro said, your partnership with both the high schools and the colleges. I think that's really a source of labor for you, and it's a great partnership with them. And I know from my own experience in college and my background, that my university had a very strong relationship with the city that we were housed in, and they used a lot of our labor to help the city in initiatives just as this, and I think our town can benefit from that. Yeah. And I would also follow up on something else, and I'll use this as the example because I think it's just a great example. A few years ago, it's probably going back on 7 or 8 years ago now, the Golf Commission came before us, and they put together their strategic plan and presented it to this board. And it was a roadmap, and theirs was even 10 years. And it was largely capital at the time. They did have operating plans, but it was largely a capital plan. And every year, we've approved without fail, I think it's about $100,000 to go through, because we knew what the roadmap was. We knew where we were going. They stuck to that roadmap, and then every year they came in and they said, okay, this is what we're going to do, this is what we did, and oh, by the way, because they did that, they won that big award last year, right? And if you go out to our golf course, it looks great, it's winning awards, and it's actually has a financial return to the town. So to the comment of coming before these bodies and presenting their strategic plan, I think there's a great benefit in that because it gets us all on the same page. So I would strongly encourage that.
Yeah, thank you. I wholeheartedly agree with that, and I hope we are there in the very near future.
Yeah, and best of luck to you, and thank you for the service, and we know you guys are volunteers as well. So thank you so much for all the hard work that you guys have put in.
Thank you.
On your commission. So with that, if there's no more questions, any questions from the public on this? Seeing none, thanks. All right. We'll go to page 89, which is the Registrar of Voters. That is the verbiage, and then the numbers are on page 90. So welcome, gentlemen. How are you this evening?
Just fine. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming in. Do you guys have any statements you'd like to make on the department before we go to questions?
I just have one. The way the town is divided now, we have 10 new districts. There's only one split district, which is District 3, which is Fairfield Woods. That's 2 state rep districts that it's part of. So we don't have the multiple cost of a lot of poll workers as we've done in the past. So there's some savings in there. Other than that, it's basically what it's been for, the years everybody's been around, and there's not that much difference.
Mr. Wagner, you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, just to let you know, it's our consensus that we're not expecting any primaries this summer. So that would be in this budget, and sometimes you'll see that number in your contingency, but that's, as I understand it, not something we're planning for this year. Also, one just programmatic change is we now have, as a result of recent state legislation, a certification program that the registrars are required to complete by the end of fiscal 17. So you'll see that as you go through these pages.
Is that certification program the reason for the large spike in educational and membership?
That's the number, that's right.
Okay. Thank you. That answers one question. I'll turn it over to board members for questions for the registrars. Why is postage going up so much this year as compared to previous
You
years?
can do that one?
I didn't do anything
Okay.
with it. So.
There are 2 reasons, one of which is that we, in a normal year, local election year or non-presidential year, will have about 5,000 voter transactions, people moving, dying, changing their party, changing their name, and so on. In a presidential year, we'll see about double that. If you look at our voter registration figures year by year, they decline between presidential elections, and they jump back up by roughly 3,000 net new voters, and that's with voters moving out of town as well. So we have a substantial mail volume related to just registration traffic in a presidential year. We also discussed in our sort of budget process that we have a substantial amount of dead wood on our list. It's a term used in the election community, people who have been registered for a great number of years without voting. So there is a procedure enabled in statute to communicate with these people, say, would you still like to remain on the list? They have to have not voted in 4 consecutive years for us to send them that notice. And so that's something, whether we would do it, it's something we have not done since the early 2000s, but we could either, we'd like to catch up with that, send that list a mailing to try and get them to remove themselves from the list, which is something.
Get a lot of dead people responding to that mailing? Or?
Not a lot of dead people. It's a lot of, you'll see people who registered to vote in high school and then went away to college, but didn't notify us in the way that like a homeowner moving might notify us.
So if we look, thank you for that, and I understand the ebb and flow of the presidential years. If we look on our budget request sheets, right, I would guess it's confusing because our fiscal years go half years, right? So we're looking at the presidential election cycle is fiscal year 2017 for us, November. So the last presidential election cycle was fiscal year 2013, right? So that's on this sheet. If I look, postage was only $5,500 in 2013, and it's been pretty consistent year after year. You guys have it going up to $8,700.
That would be that secondary, the
so
program to contact and remove dead wood.
Okay, now, printing, binding, and photography, we have it at $12,900 in 2013 and $11,000 next year. Is that similar answer to that it's a presidential cycle?
We certainly have more ballots that we print. I guess we have election day registration is a big factor in that we have to, that's something that we don't know what we'll be looking at until the day of. The great majority of that figure is just the ballot printing for the presidential year. You can see $9,000 is listed as the presidential ballot printing.
Okay, and then overtime earnings, what is the spike there? What's that caused by? I mean, I guess it's not, it's pretty flat. It's up $500. Is that just, again, the election cycle? What's driving that?
I think we find that as we reach, especially with a presidential year where, we do 2 things, right? We maintain the voter list all year, and we also conduct the election, which is a lot of training, a lot of, packaging of materials. And we have a staff of 1 in the office. So, we know exactly where that money is going. It is, you'll find that as you have all day new voter registrations coming in, from 2012, I remember the figure was about 250 a day was what we were seeing at that time. You sort of lose that time to prepare your materials that you would have in any other election year. So it's just in recognition of the fact that there will be more need for that because there's less sort of wiggle room during your day.
Okay.
The other thing is,
Please.
one, the online voter system that's been put in place by the Secretary of State, that sort of takes care of a lot of stuff that people would normally send in, voter registration cards or come in person, stuff like that. Especially since we've had the debates and the primaries. I come in the morning and sometimes I find 32 online registrations waiting on the system to be processed, type of thing. That cuts back a lot of the traffic and others, things like that. Also, Matt didn't tell you is he has 2 of his assistants that come in at least 1 or 2 days a week also to help out.
Okay.
That would be in seasonal, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other, thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Mr. Walsh?
Just following up on Mr. Flynn's question in regards to the education and memberships, is that canvas in the where's the Canvas fees? Is that, what line would that be on?
Fees and special.
Fees and professional services?
Yeah.
That line's only going up, it's not really going up that much, 2.27%?
Well, there's postage, and then there's, that's the only variable cost
The
relating
postage?
to Canvas. There's no, additional information that's being,
I thought that was education and memberships, you said.
yeah, you were talking about Canvas?
Well, I was looking at your budget summary, and you were talking about your 6.2%, and you said that it's going up that much due to state training required for seasonal workers and registrars, and a canvass of voters conducted every 4 years. So that's why I was asking where the canvass fees would be, and Mr. Attorney mentioned it might be in fees and professional services, which is only going up 2.27%.
If we're going to use a company, that's
Yep.
where we put it.
Okay.
If Matt does it through his company, it's not in there.
What's his company?
And that was the, I have, how do I put this? I do the Canvas data for about 130 towns in the state of Connecticut. So I have not, I've provided the data to the town at no charge, because I don't want to have a sort of a financial, I want to be a vendor, I guess, in that way. But that's been data I've been providing for a couple of years. But the number in the budget summary is the same postage figure that Mr. Flynn was discussing earlier.
So that's the additional money for the canvas? Is in
That's
the
right.
postage line? Okay. The education and memberships, what's changing so much that the number's going up to $3,400? It's going up 1,600%. Versus, I look at the other 4 years, and they're averaging between $200 and $400.
This is recent state legislation. There's a certification program. It's offered by the University of Connecticut. The fee, it is a series of 12 classes, and each class costs $200 per attendee. So that's just, the number is 2 registrars times 12 classes times $200.
So that's just another unfunded mandate from our legislature?
I don't have anything to say about that.
Can we?
That's fantastic.
Yeah, can we go back, and I just want to understand this a little bit. What data are you is your company, so you've got an LLC set up. I'm not asking you. You've got a company set up, and you do data work for a lot of other municipalities. That's what you said, right? What is that data? What gets provided to the town?
It is the National Change of Address Registry for the U.S. Postal Service. You can go out and get a license to run these files, and basically you submit your list. It tells you everyone who's moved in the last 18 months.
Okay, so you have a separate company that goes and does that?
Mm-hmm.
That uses the postal information and then updates these lists?
Yeah, it's basically just a software application license. So in the same way that, I might use like mapping software to work on redistricting maps, I would also use postal processing software to generate an updated list.
So what does your company do with it?
What does my company do with it?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I have written a tool set to generate PDF reports. So it generates a list of, here's the list of everyone who's moved within town, here's everyone who's moved out of town.
Does it at all manipulate the data that's within the town systems? Does the software do that?
It doesn't, the state system is, it's on a dedicated connection, hardline connection to the state. There's no, you
Oh,
can't
does-
plug a system into it.
Yeah, what is your system, does your system interact at all?
My system makes PDFs.
Okay, so
Sold.
it pulls from the town. It pulls from, I'm trying to understand exactly, and forgive me for being, not following this.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. You're an elected official in town. First of all, I applaud you for separating the compensation part of this, so thank you for that, okay? But you're an elected official in town. Does your software go in and touch the data of the town? Does it manipulate that data in any way?
It does not.
Okay.
It takes as an input the statewide voter list provided by the Secretary of State's office.
Yep.
And generates town-by-town moving lists out of that.
So it maps what the state gives you to what the town has and provides an output as to what the differences are?
Well, it takes what the state has, submits it to the Postal Service, and generates a list of the people who have moved.
And then what's done out with that list?
We manually enter the list of people who have moved, one at a time, into the state system, generate a letter to that person saying, we believe you've moved, and depending on whether it's in town or out of town, there's a different procedure that we follow.
Okay, and your software that you've developed does exactly what?
Generates a PDF file of the people who have moved.
So that's all it does is generate the PDF, so it smashes the two lists together and generates the PDF?
Correct.
All right, thank you for the explanation.
And it's fascinating stuff. I'd be glad to talk with you outside of a hearing room about it at great length if you're interested. I love this stuff.
I
so.
appreciate you indulging my curiosity.
Oh, it's no trouble at all.
Go ahead, Mr. Walsh.
I'm looking at your personnel summary. Are there assistant registrar of voters? There are?
Mhm.
Are they compensated?
Yes.
Oh, they are? Okay, where's that compensation?
That's in the others, in the
Seasonal line.
The seasonal line, okay.
Seasonal line, other staff, there should, you should have some sort of seasonal thing.
Right.
You don't have that?
I don't.
Because all there says is.
See attached.
See attached. So. That would be good.
Okay.
So a
and how-
deputy is paid at a slightly higher rate than an assistant registrar.
A
but
deputy is?
Yeah.
Okay.
But our assistants will help us with voter registration activity. They'll go to the nursing homes and help supervise balloting there and such.
Is that an hourly job or is that
That's
a
hourly.
salary?
Hourly.
Hourly? Same thing with the deputy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, I've heard that there's these people, I just didn't know, I didn't see them on the personnel summary.
Yeah, I think, Mrs. Gardner, can we, for next year's budget process, I agree, can we expand this listing of what personnel, how this budget is built beyond these couple of positions?
We generally do a sub-schedule like this. The registrar of voters provide a sub-schedule if they're seasonal, but we don't list all seasonals.
I just want to know, we just want to know kind of the number of positions and stuff like this.
Right.
Let's work on something after the budget cycle, because it is, for them, it's a substantial amount of money for their
And we do
department.
provide you with the schedule every year. as
Where
well.
is it?
Handing it out to you now.
Okay, well, I'd like to see it before the meeting as opposed to... So maybe we can put it in the back of the book next year, so it's there. Thank you for doing it. There you go. Questions, anybody on this? I know we just got this. I didn't see it in the back. Anybody? Questions, comments, concerns?
Not on this, but on something else.
Sorry?
Not on this, but something else financial.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Becker.
Well, just, not so much to them, but a question here is, do we have to set their salaries because they're up for election? Is it this year? So is that us for registrar? I know that the changed some between the BOS and BOF, but I just want to make sure we're,
I think Mr. Wagner pointed out, according to state statute, technically it's set by the Board of Selectmen, Matt, is that correct?
That's my understanding. We're going to have Mr. Lesser look into it, I
Lester looked
recall.
at it,
Okay.
I identified that
Sorry.
to the chair, and we need to just get back and close on that
Okay.
at this point rather quickly.
Yes.
yeah.
So we'll
All
talk
right,
about it
yeah,
on-
that's fine.
on that night,
Just-
okay?
Yeah, perfect.
We've been waiting for an answer on how we want to go about it.
Yeah, I know there's a lot that are in questions.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing that up. Mr. Walsh?
So these are estimated hours?
Yeah, they're
Oh, yeah,
estimated.
I just don't know how this all works, so.
Everything relating to poll workers
Yep.
is defined,
Okay.
like, here's the number of people.
Yep.
We have, the assistants are the budget for the whole year. We peak at election time, and then we, we have them less frequently in the springtime, generally.
So like the deputy registers, when it says 250 hours, that is a guesstimate, or is that based on how many hours you see them working on budget to budget to budget?
It's a guesstimate, and as we approach that, we use them less.
Okay. Thank you.
Any others? Seeing none, gentlemen, thank you very much. Do we have anything from the public on this? All right, we'll move along then.
Thank you
Can I just
kindly.
ask
Thank you.
I have one more question. What does stipend ROV mean?
That is, you don't pay us overtime. And we both get paid, according to HR, for 19 hours a week or whatever it is there.
Okay.
So when election time comes, we're not working 19 and a half hours anywhere close. We're working a lot more, sometimes 40, whatever. So that is basically the catch-all type of thing for the election.
Okay.
And we've done that. We did that originally. We based it on, I figured out how many hours I worked at least, for those averages. And that's what we ended up with. And you guys have been approving that for quite some time.
Okay. Do we have to put money in for Medicare and Social Security or anything like that for that? Because they're town employees.
They receive the Medicare portion.
What?
They're part-time employees, and they receive the Medicare portion of Social Security only,
Okay.
but not the rest of the people on the sheet. They receive nothing.
Okay.
All right. Gentlemen, once again, thank you. All right, we're going to go on to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Mr. Walsh has something he'd like to say.
Yeah, I'm going to be recusing myself from the next several budgets because in my law practice, I have to deal with some of these other departments, so I have to avoid the appearance of an impropriety or conflict. I'm going to be recusing myself from the Zoning Board of Appeals, Town Planning and Zoning, Probate Court, Historic District Commission, and Conservation. So I will not be participating in these conversations nor voting on them.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh, we appreciate that. And you're going to go put yourself in another room and we'll come grab you? All right, we're at the Zoning Board of Appeals. Welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening, and your budget is flat year over year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It did go up last year strictly for, well, the advertising and postage. Do you want to talk to any pieces of this?
No, I think that, this is ZBA, right? That level is correct. It's, if you look at the past action, it's pretty close to what the average is for that need, so I think we're very comfortable with maintaining it what we had last year.
Okay, do we have any questions, comments on this budget? Seeing none, we'll go to Town Planning and Zoning, which, let's go to page 51 first, which is revenue. And Mrs. Gardner, thank you for pointing this out to me. And the revenue is $46,000 in total, and it's done essentially strictly on a three-year average, is that correct? Calculated by the Finance Department? Anything that should be pointed out to you, does the committee, or do you have any problems with these, this?
No, I don't. It's essentially based on permit fees. We don't anticipate any substantial reduction or increase at this point. So, yeah, we're very comfortable with that estimate.
Okay. Any questions, comments from board members on revenue for TPZ? Seeing none, let's go to the expense budget, which is the verbiage is 94 and the numbers are 95, and it's a 1.6% increase.
Yes, sir. The increase essentially is due to salary adjustments and also a $2,000 share that we are sharing with some other departments.
Is this the
Assessors-
GPS
Yes.
system? Okay.
Yeah, yes, yep.
Huh? GIS, whatever, okay, fine.
Close enough.
Had to correct me, thank you.
I know you strive to be excellent in all phases of your life, Mr. Flynn.
Go ahead.
Yeah, other than that, there's no capital request. Everything else is same as last year.
Do we have any questions, comments, concerns from board members? There's no changes in personnel. This is all, Mrs. Gardner, this is all a result of the union contracts being settled. That affect this. Questions, comments, concerns from board members on town planning and zoning? Seeing none, we'll go to the public. Anything at the public? None there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You have a good evening.
You too.
All right, we're going to go to the probate court, which is page 97. I see Judge Caruso's here tonight. Good evening, Judge.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Board of Selectmen. Brought with me our court attorney, Attorney Maxim.
Good evening.
And
evening, good
thank you
evening.
very much for hosting us today, as you know. Well, just to bring you up to date, the Fairfield Probate Court in May will be celebrating 350 years of service to the citizens of this state.
375?
No,
Okay.
300.
Oh, 50.
50. Because we were founded in May of 1666. The
And you were there at the founding, Judge?
I believe so.
No, but we actually have on my desk some files.
Oh, is that right?
Nobody's wanted to touch since then. But we do have, and nor do I. But all the files are still there. So that's a great thing for the people of this community. As you know, we deal with wills, we deal with conservatorships, that is assisting people with tragedies such as Alzheimer's. We deal with parental rights, and I can't say enough about how much Attorney Maxim does to take care of so many of our parents and grandparents in that realm. So we've come to you with a budget this year which is reduced by 3.77%. The expenditures which we make are mostly with regard to the office, and the supplies and mailing and our equipment is what drives our request for the $28,100.
Thank you. Do we have questions? Mr. Becker?
Thanks for coming out tonight. Last year when you were here, we spoke about the concerns coming down from the state and how that would affect your office, and if maybe we'd end up having to see actually the opposite, kind of in this budget of a spike to sort of have to take care of that. Can you just give a kind of just a highlight as to how some of those changes have either affected you guys or, or the residents,
Sure,
what
thank
they
you, Mr.
did.
Becker. The overall, when we consolidated many of the districts throughout the state, from 117 to 54, was based, previously, each court had managed its monies, its employees, and forwarded the money to the state. When the change occurred and the legislature made certain promises, including funding to the rate that we had previously had, since that time, they increased fees. None of those increased fees benefit the court or all the people who help us. When I say all the people who help us, we have conservators and attorneys who day in and day out go out for almost no compensation, and I consider what the state is providing for them and the hours that they take caring for people who can't help themselves, a tremendous asset to this community. The monies coming back from the state are not coming back from the state. So overall, as a probate system, we're hitting a shortfall because of the money we pay for indigents. We also have the impact of all the accumulated taxes, which if we could start Fairfield County at Naples, might be a big help. With so many people in this community now choosing to save taxes in their states by relocating to other states, particularly Florida, that does have an impact on us and our community. So in terms of what we could expect in the future from the state to help reduce this budget per se, I don't foresee anything coming from the state.
Oh, yeah, and I don't expect this to be, it was more, I thought it might go the other way. I mean, just trying to keep you guys, you know, afloat in a sense. I mean, I think some of what you're saying is disturbing but not surprising. You know, obviously you're doing a very good job to do everything you can to manage it. I just want to get a little bit of an idea. So I guess just.
But I appreciate the offer,
Thank
and we'll be glad to come back to you when the governor doesn't fund us.
No, it's you know, it's a no, it's a, you know, we don't like to raise things around here, nobody does, but it's a concerning thing, because you certainly deal with kind of some of the most needy and vulnerable, and the pot keeps getting smaller, and, you know, that was what I raised last year, and it seems like you're doing okay, you know, with that adjustment, and you're kind of trudging through it, but, you know, it is a big concern when it deals with what's going on in your department.
To pick up any of the burden?
I mean, and I agree with you, that's one of the things we fear would be further consolidation, increasing the size of our districts, which, quite frankly, are optimal now, but if they increase the size of the districts, if history is any basis to go upon, we'll see increased demand with fewer people to provide those services. So that's, of course, a big concern. And, you know, yes, when I was in the legislature, and those would be called unfunded mandates, when the state pushes more of the burden on the town. And so that's possible. In today's budget cycle up in Hartford, that is not without the realm of possibility, but I would hope that we continue to be able to manage as we have in the past.
Thanks.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Hoffman?
Good evening, Judge.
Mr. Hoffman.
I think you said earlier that none of the fees that your office collects come back to the town? Is it?
That is correct. Previously, each court, we managed our own businesses as our own businesses. So the staff salaries and everything else would come out of the fees generated within the community, and the surplus, of which Fairfield, and indeed the 8 towns in Fairfield County, provided 48% of the funds going into the system. But we would take those surpluses and send them to Hartford, and they send them to needed communities such as Bridgeport and Norwalk and elsewhere. Now, under the current system, no, we send it to Hartford. And indeed, any of the new fee increases that went into effect last year, some of which were retroactive, those were kept in the state treasurer's office.
Okay, I just don't see a line for who pays salaries.
The salaries come out of are paid from the state.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right, I see. And so you just have these various office expenses, really, that are paid out of town funds that are being appropriated in the budget tonight?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for probate? Seeing none.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go to page 99, which is the Historic District. I like these budgets. They all have negatives in front of them. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and the selectmen. My name is Christopher Shea, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Historic District Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Thank you for being here tonight. Do you have anything you'd like to say before we go to questions?
Just a quick highlight that is already printed in the message that we did take a hard look with some help to cut our expenses where they hadn't really needed to be used in the past. So we believe we're very much in line with reality and feel that our budget is a good, solid budget.
Thank you. We're down, so we were at $12,000 last year, we're at $11,000 this year, down by 8%. Any questions, comments, concerns from board members on this budget? Seeing none, can you give budgeting tips to other departments? No, just...
I'd be happy to. How much time have I got?
Thank you very much. Anything from the public? All right. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you.
All right, we're going to go to the Conservation Department now. We're going to start at page 43, which is revenue, and then we'll come back to page 103, which is expense. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming in again.
Yes, sis.
All right, now, in looking at your revenue budget,
Yes.
it's $238,000, and it looks as though every line item is based on a 3-year average. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that was calculated by the Finance Department?
Yep, with me in hand.
Okay, and you're comfortable with those numbers?
Yes, I am.
Okay, do we have any questions from board members on the conservation revenue estimates? Mr. Becker? I can see you winding up for a question there.
Yeah, and a couple things I think on the department, but it's not on the specific numbers. I understand kind of your estimates and where you're going with that. But it seems as though, I guess a sentiment that I hear from people with the conservation department is at every turn, it's, oh, we need a study, and, oh, it's going to be a conservation, cutting a check to a conservation, and I get it when you're in certain areas, it makes perfect sense, but it seems like there's been, I just hear time and time again, there's a jumpiness to sort of anytime you're anywhere near, almost like they're just hunting down everybody they can get to go do a study. And I don't know, it seems like I get it, it brings in revenue, but then it clearly, there's a staff component to then go do all of that. It gets into the size of the department. And you came to us recently from another town, so I guess I would ask sort of what your prior experience, I think at some point, when you first came to like one of the quarterlies, you were still sort of diving through the way, this dynamic would be within, your new department here after somebody running it for so long. But is there something, that I'm missing there? Because when people approach with that, it seems concerning, actually. It's sort of, some of the examples make perfect sense, and you go, well, of course they went and did it. And others are like, are they jumping too much?
If you're asking me if there's an absolute way that things have to be done with every application, it's not planning and zoning where, things are very linear and there's a specific set of rules to follow every time. What you're saying is that we ask people to do studies and that's necessarily costing them money. I think that's kind of a little bit of a mischaracterization. What we're actually doing is trying to, look at a set of plans and look at how it impacts the environment, wetlands in particular. And every property is different, every wetland's different, every environment's different, and every application's different. So we try to look at something, and again, if it's a very simple, easy thing that can be reviewed and mediated and a permit issued with the least amount of expense, we're always trying to do that. But there's certain applications that are very complex, and they do require a great deal of study into those applications. If someone comes into our department and says, I want to put a deck on my house, are we making them spend, thousands and thousands of dollars to go out and study that issue? No. But if someone wants to put in a 4-lot subdivision and it requires the crossing of a floodway, and we have to study, a box culvert rather than a bridge, those are expenses that are going to come into play. So, it's a little different on every application. And, my previous experience in other towns and in private business, no. The department's doing what is needed to do to protect the interests of the town, but also to protect the interests of the neighbors on every application. You know, it's not, unfortunately, the way wetlands is done is it doesn't fit into a nice little box every time. So, you know, our fees, I think it goes back to the fees that we're collecting. You know, we have a charge by this commission that we need to collect fees to cover the cost to basically administrate our program, and that's what we're doing. We do have a fee schedule subcommittee that's set up right now under the Conservation Commission to look at the fee schedules and to kind of see if there's an easier way to do this or a better way to do this. And that's the last time that was done is 2005. We just started that process. So do I feel comfortable with the fees that we're charging right now? Yes, I do. The way we developed this revenue is over the past 3 years. We've had a very high uptick in revenue. This past year, we were able to collect 125% of our fees to cover the program. So there may be some area there where we can reduce fees. If you look at all towns and the way that they collect fees, you know, for inland wetland applications, it's like comparing apples to oranges. No town is the same. Makes it very difficult. Between Greenwich to Bridgeport to Stratford, they're all different because the way the Connecticut General Statutes reads, it just says that the towns are able to collect fees to reimburse them for the cost of administrating the program. So there's no, the DEP, who we get most of our guidance on, is really silent in the way that we collect fees. So again, we have a subcommittee that's been meeting, and you know that is something we're looking at, amending our fee structure. But I do feel comfortable with the fees that we have here because there has been an uptick in the fees that we've been collecting based on the volume of the permits that we've been issuing.
All right. Good
All
for
set, Mr.
now.
Becker?
Yeah, I may have some follow-ups, but I'll do it direct. Thanks.
We'll go, Mr. Timniak.
Hi, how are you, Brian?
Hey, how are you?
Good to see you. Two quick questions. One, you said you're projecting revenue at 125% this year?
That was what we collected last year. Again, what comes in is based on the amount of permits that are being issued in any given year. You know, we obviously have to look at the economy. It's kind of like the building department. I can't anticipate all of the permits that are coming in, but based on the past 3 years, we have seen a bit of an uptick.
I mean, would you be comfortable raising it based upon, instead of using a 3-year average, 2-year average? I mean, because I think I see more building going around town. I see this trending that way. And if you haven't looked at the fee schedule since 2005,
Well, one thing is, obviously, it's not in this budget, it's the fees that we've collected to date this year. I mean, we're at about 89% of our budgeted period, and we're going into our busy period.
Yeah.
So I do feel comfortable that that we will be able to collect what's been budgeted, $238,000. And again, our program has been you know, basically it's been costing us about $220,000, or I'm sorry, about $180,000 a year to administrate the program, which the goal is to bring those costs down as well.
how long is it going to take to redo the fee schedule then? I guess would make a question. And
So-
should we look at generally, should we look at this instead of every 10 years, every 3 years?
That's my goal, and one of the things right now is the fee schedule should probably be looked at, you know, mindfully on an annual basis, just as far as, you know, comparison to other towns. I don't know if you need to submit a committee every year and redo them, but the other thing that hasn't been done in a long time is the regulations haven't been changed because the state of Connecticut has not issued their new model. So we're hoping to have a change, update of the regulations, but also update of fee schedule. So there might be some ways of doing, streamlining some things that will bring some cost savings into the process itself too.
And are our regulations more aggressive than other towns?
They're based off the state model. To there's certain parts of the regulations are, but most of it adheres to the state model, which, again, the state,
Actually, state model adheres to our regulations. Our
Right.
regulations came first. Tom drew them up. The state largely adopted them, and they're generally the regulations that are used throughout the state.
So are all towns required to follow the model?
No.
well, they don't follow the model. You don't want to get too far away from the model, because then you end up being in kind of the woods when you go to court. So the model is, most towns follow the model, and then they can add on to that model. But the town of Fairfield, we just have a lot of regulated wetlands in the town.
Any other questions on the revenue side of the house on conservation? Seeing none, let's turn to page 104 and 105, which is the expense budget now. It looks like it's going up by 5%, but that's because in the 2016 budget, it does not account for the wetlands compliance officer that was moved from contingency, correct? So this would be the full year of the wetlands compliance officer. If you move that in here, I think the note says that the increase becomes 1.9%. Is that correct statement?
That's correct.
And Finance Department, you concur, right? And you have we can pass that out if you'd like, but let's not wait for it.
Yeah, I have handouts as well.
Thank you. What else, before I turn it over for questions, anything you'd like to say on the expense budget other than what I just said?
Nope.
Anyone have any questions for the gentleman on the budget, on the expense budget? We can, yes. Thank you.
I have a question, Bob.
Please, go ahead, Mr. Tiniak.
It's always been a thought of mine that some of the items in your department are prime for like regionalization. And I'm saying, talking about perhaps sharing 3 towns, and I think the wetlands officer is probably a good example. You know, sharing that officer with a town who doesn't need a full-time person in there, is that something you've looked at, or, I mean, am I talking?
Right now, well, we have 2 staff people who basically administrate the wetlands program. One of them's full-time, and one of them's part-time. So the full-time person does spend all their time doing that work. The part-time person who we just hired, I mean, there's really no way to cut up his schedule anymore. And the goal of that was that there's 2 applications that we take in on a daily basis, and also that other towns do, to basically maximize the amount of work that's going out the door. We have complex applications, things that are, you know, obviously your subdivisions and commercial type of development, and then we have what you would term, you know, a staff certificate, which is, you know, decks, sheds, construction on normal houses. So right now, we're very busy with complex applications, but we're also dealing with a lot of, you know, again, staff applications. So the part-time person has helped get the backlog down from 65 days when I started in May 1st to 0. I mean, we don't have a backlog. As the permits are coming in, they're getting turned around, you know, within a couple days. And that was the goal of hiring that person. So I don't think it'd be feasible right now to share, you know, those resources with another town. It would break things up too much.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, Mr.
Yep.
Tiniak. Other questions on the conservation budget? Mr. DeWitt?
No, I mean, just take them out, period.
Thank you. So a question for this year's, the budget we're executing right now. So we as a body moved $31,553 to contingency.
That's correct.
I don't think we've moved that out. So have you hired a wetland?
No, we did move that out.
Okay.
Yeah, so that position was filled November 3rd. It was filled the first day after Thanksgiving, whatever that was.
Okay,
They
good.
started. So we started the process of hiring that person in late September. So there would be a savings between July 1st and when we hired that
Whatever,
person.
50%
Yes, so that- in that budget.
25% of the salary.
That's correct.
So the new person at 31,546 is being added to part-time payroll, which I understand.
That's right.
There is a fairly substantial change in this year's budget on your fees and professional services. 38.5 turns into 54.950. What is that?
No, 38.5 turns into 42.
No, and this paper you gave us here, fees and professional services for the FY16 budget was 38,500. Now it's 54,950. So it went up
I see it as a,
$16,000.
I think Linda explained that.
Is this
the
another
other
transfer
night Of a,
from last year?
It's a carryover from last year.
window that might be open.
So,
From what?
so what that was that they, when I started in May, they had the Hoydens Hill Barn project. They had been carrying over the operating budget for, I think, 2 budget cycles in order to get that project done. They had a grant from the state to restore the barn. And for whatever reason, it hadn't gone out to bid. It went out to bid. It exceeded the available funds. So I actually went back and reworked, we re-engineered the project a bit to make sure that it came in under budget. And I was able to get that project done by August 15th. So it was a slight carryover from the previous year. But that had been being carried over, I think, 2 or 3 years. So we were trying to clear that up. So that project's done. It's been put to bed.
Okay, yep, I see that in transfers. I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, Mr. DeWitt. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a final comment. Mr. Carey is coming up on kind of finishing up his second budget, but kind of his first year here. And he's been a tremendous resource to the town, both in conservation, but in his teamwork with other department heads. And we found his skill set and experience extremely valuable overall. He's also added to our grant writing capability and has been very helpful across the board. So I just want to both compliment Mr. Carey, but also let everybody on this board know his value to the town.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, and I think he just made your case for a raise when that comes due, right? But, no, thank you for all your hard work, and appreciate it. Thank you for the budget preparation. Mr. Becker, do you have anything?
So, I do. Just on the, kind of the head counts, we've talked about this wetlands, which we had made that adjustment. So, coming up on a year, going through the budget, but still being, newer here. Have you gone through now between your office and your commission and all that, sort of really figuring out where you want things to be? Is this the right head count? Is it too
Yes.
low, too high, any of that?
So-
And the whole,
So I think one of the issues with our department is that most times when people come and deal with us on a daily basis at the counter in the department, they're seeing about a third to a quarter of what we actually do for the town. So when you look through our personnel summary, you see a lot of people, but most of those people are out in the field doing work that's related to open space management. And we have 1,200 acres, about 1,200 acres of open space that need management. And when I started, there was this part-time person who is now working for the department, was brought in not just to administrate, he was brought in really just to take the load off of the person who's supposed to be in the field overseeing the open space management program. So that's what we're doing now. So the person who's part-time is really, I've been able to push the other person back to what they were hired to do, which is open space management. And if you go and listen to most people, between Lake Mohegan and, all of our open space parcels, about 50 of them, they need active management. And the goal is to, in the coming summer, is to kind of catch up on a lot of things that weren't being done. And that's where the value in the budget really lies.
So, and I'm not sure we want to go to you on this or maybe finance, but, there are areas in this budget where if a department really, right, is kind of split so much between two areas that it ends up kind of getting its own department, or definitely some more definition within the budget. I think that's definitely a problem. And I know that your quarterly, when we went through the wetlands, you brought that up, that it is what makes this hard to sort of compare It's unique to Fairfield, but to understand. So, I'm not sure tonight's necessarily the night, but I think it's, at least for our board, perhaps, it's worth considering if open space should be either defined a little different, broken out some, so we can have that conversation and a conservation one, and people maybe could get a clearer picture long-term, because I think they're kind of two different beasts to some extent, and that's become a little more, I mean, I understand that they're under your world, but that's my take, and I know we've done it in some other areas, even we're starting to in the library, I mean, but seems to be kind of an issue when we have these conversations.
I'll just say real quick, the way the department's been set up since 1974, if you were to separate those two out, it would be a complete paperwork nightmare as far as land records, the way things have been deeded in the town. I mean, I'm not debating what you're saying. It's just that the history of the department is probably one of the oldest departments in town. Things have been set up, things have been deeded, things have been put in trust to the Conservation Commission, to the department.
And I don't necessarily mean literally a whole nother department, obviously, because then there's, you probably end up spending more money trying to do that. I just mean the way that maybe it's broken out from a budgetary or, sort of tracking way. And maybe that can be done within your own department.
Absolutely.
With some coding, perhaps, of accounts, things like that, can, so it's not even broken out, but it's a little more visible, I think is my point, and then we can have a more clear discussion.
Mr. Timiak.
Yeah, one final question here. When we were talking to Public Works, I asked essentially, it makes sense for them to outsource the fields to get lined. Would it make sense to outsource open space to be, mowed and trails cut back versus have our own crew do it? And walk me through that.
Well, I'll tell you right now, just in my prior experience, really running a major portion of Public Works in Stratford, we don't have a big crew doing a lot of work. We do outsource some of the work, or try to, where we can find efficiencies. But one of the things when you outsource, again, I have a very small crew, is we tend to lose a reactionary component to a lot of the problems we have. We just had that windstorm, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, or wherever it was. We're responding all over town to down trees that are coming off open space parcels. I can't contract that type of service out to have that reactionary thing. Garbage, things like that. When I've contracted those types of services out in the past, some things work where there's a savings, and a lot of times it doesn't. It becomes more of a hassle when there's not someone who will pick up the phone. If we have like a long holiday weekend and the garbage isn't getting picked up and the contractor's not doing it, that's great. I can fire him, but I still need to pick up the garbage on that weekend. So there's not a lot of crew I have here, and they do work pretty efficiently. And there's also a lot of intricate knowledge that the crew has that's institutionalized with the management of the tide gates. I've had Waterman down here, who's actually the company that manufactures those. There's a design going back that Conservation has developed. They actually come to us and ask us how to tweak things. So there's certain things in the department that there's no way to contract that. But I'll more than willing to take you around, kind of show you those things, and the way it's come to be and why it is that way.
Yeah, and I appreciate the answer, and I understand your logic. The Public Works Department sort of gave the opposite case, that having it outsourced was they were able to bring people in without having to worry about union hours, prepare the fields for nighttime if we got a rainstorm late in the day. So they had essentially a different case of the reactionary works out better for them in that situation.
I don't have a lot of those types of union issues with with ball fields and nighttime work and things like that. That's a little bit of a different animal with the fields and the prep time. It's a little bit different. Our crew is a little bit more technical about dealing with certain. They all have to have certain licensing for chemical spraying and things like that. Arborist license, so it's a little bit beyond your average mowing a field.
Yeah, I would, adding on to that, I think that as we've talked with Conservation and Public Works to see if we can coordinate some activities between the two. It comes back to some of the technical skill sets that Brian mentioned that make it difficult just to go out to the open market and pick anybody in to come and do that. So I think that in addition to the licenses, there's a little bit more skill to the open space management than going out and mowing a ball field.
Okay. Anything else? Seeing none, once again, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh, and Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd like to mention that Chairman Gumper joined us partway through the conversation.
Thank you very much. All right, can we ask Mr. Walsh, if he's within earshot, to come back in, or can someone grab him, please? Mr. Becker, can you go see if Mr. Walsh? Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know he doesn't want to miss the shellfish discussion, which is page 107 is the verbiage.
Truly a legal hotbed.
Yes. And 109 are the numbers. We're going up by 3.5%, which is $300. Hello again.
Hello.
So what's going on here? It's just secretarial services largely?
Yeah, so obviously this administrates the Shellfish Commission's program. The one change is they do hire a seasonal part-time person to do sampling. That's required by the state. And we did add the Shellfish Commission secretary. We did bump up her fee. The commission felt that she did a good job and they didn't want to lose her. So they did raise her fee from, I believe, $75 to $100 per meeting, which is the standard secretary's recording fee.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns on this one? Seeing none, we're done with the Shellfish Commission. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
And we'll go to page 112, which is the miscellaneous contingency. And who wants to speak to this?
I'll speak to that, Mr. Flynn. Miscellaneous contingency, it's been a budget that's been at $45,000 for I don't know how many decades. As you can see, fiscal year 15 actual was $36K, 14 was 10, 13 was 9. Try to be prudent in what goes in here. If there's something that makes sense to go into another straight categorization, we do that. The things that do go in here, for example, this year, some of the things that will be going in here, background checks, things that aren't budgeted in with respect to labor, background checks, the Town Facilities Commission secretarial fees go in here because they don't have secretary, they don't have a budget. Girl Scout luncheon, which is not budgeted, which is an annual function, and there's I think when we put together the process for hiring the fire chief and the deputy fire chief, that went in here. With respect to the current searches, we've been doing in-house, the HR and purchasing. So, but the advertising would probably go in here.
So, Mr. Mayor, all the charges that go in here largely come from either you or the first selectman and are day-to-day type expenses that may or may not be incurred based on events that happen during the course of the year.
Correct. And plus, like I think last year we had some blight issues that came in here. There was some blight legal activity and
All right,
some
we don't
blight-
need to go
yeah.
through all the,
Yeah.
we don't need
Yeah.
to go through all the details, but
Yeah.
Mr. Walsh, I think you had your hand up, and then I'm going to go to Mr. DeWitt.
In past years, did we put some fees in here for some of the appeals from the assessments? I thought in heavy years we put some years, no?
I don't believe so, but Mr. Walsh, I'm not going to tell you I remember all of that, but I believe those were covered
There's enough money in your budget?
Mr. Ross's
Budget. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you. I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. This has been $45,000 budget for probably as long as I can remember, but we never spend it. And as we're fond of doing with our revenue, doing a 3-year, average, why don't we try to do that here? Because we have a year, we were at 9,500. Last year was 35,000, maybe because of the
Mr.
hiring the
DeWitt,
chiefs.
one thing I'll point out, though I agree with you on this one, if it's not spent, it just goes into the general fund.
Doesn't roll anywhere else.
Right. If it's not spent, it just goes into the general fund. Whereas if we don't put it there and something happens, the budget is exposed to be over budget. Just a
Peace.
thought process.
Peace. Yep, thank you.
And nobody is looking at this trying to grow it. We're not trying to expand it. We're not trying to add new miscellaneous contingency categories.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on contingency? Seeing none, let's go to page 122, which is the verbiage on community and economic development. And page 123 are the numbers. And this is going up a healthy amount, largely in fees and professional services. Good evening, Mr. Barnhart.
Good evening. Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development. As the chairman indicated, there are a couple areas of significant change. One would be in the seasonal payroll, and the second would be in fees and professional services. With respect to the seasonal payroll line, what we're asking for is consideration of a small amount so that we could provide a stipend or an hourly wage for interns that we might be able to steal from Fairfield or Sacred Heart University that would assist us with our primarily social media functions, but there are a couple other projects, including assisting me in putting together an application for a moratorium under 8-30G, as well as doing some business outreach as it relates to our retail initiatives, so that they're very popular, but they tend to be very labor intensive. So to the extent to which I have some relatively inexpensive labor to assist me doing some of the legwork, that would be much appreciated. And then with regard to fees and professional services, obviously there's some significant issues facing the town. We're in the process of doing a long-range plan, working with the Economic Development Commission to do that. Obviously, we have the redevelopment of the Fairfield Metro Center site, the reuse of the GE campus, all of which will factor into our workload for the upcoming year, and we're looking for some additional resources, mindful as we are with respect to the budget issues and constraints. The thought was that this would provide some flexibility to retain some outside expertise with respect to those types of projects, but would not necessarily have a long-range commitment for the town in the event that we wanted to go a different direction as a result of the long-range plan. You don't have a staff person, perhaps under a union contract, you might have to deal with. So the thought was to bring on board a contractor or contractors to address specific needs within the organization, one of which would be to further our communications plan, outreach to the business community. We find ourselves mostly in the information business and problem-solving business, and again, that can be as it comes, and something that needs to be sustained in the long term. So it's not something you can start down a path and then pull back. So our thought was, again, having some resources to do those types of things would be very helpful. And the rest of it is pretty much as it has been in the past. So.
Before I turn it over to board members, you mentioned two items there. You mentioned GE, which we know that's an ongoing item. Read about it in the press. We've been briefed a little bit. Members might have a question or two on that. What's going on with Metro Center? Because you referenced that in your justification for this. Where does that stand right now, just so that we know?
Well, we're working with the ownership of the property. There's been some change in the leadership group.
Mr. Whittick still involved or no?
Mr. Whittick is still involved. It's BlackRock Realty. There are other equity partners that are taking more of a leadership role as it relates to the site. We've been in communication with them regularly as it relates to their plan. They've had discussions with the state DOT relative to the possibility of putting in restroom facilities at Fairfield Metro. To my area, we've been working with them as it relates to the timing of their application to TP&Z and what they envision in terms of the use of the site. There have been some discussions, and they played a supportive role in terms of our application to the state. The state, as you may know, had issued a request for applications related to infrastructure and other improvements that would help facilitate TOD development, and we responded to that request for applications and put forth a request for $2 million to help address a longstanding sewer capacity issue in the area. And we talked to the folks at BlackRock as well as other property owners, and they supported that application. So I don't have a strong, I don't know for certain exactly when they're proposing. I know they have, the last communication we had with them was that they had a letter of intent out to a prospective major tenant, not office, but retail. And part of the issue there is, how does that relate to the entire site? So we're in conversations with them. We expect them to make an application shortly, but I don't have a definitive timetable.
Mr. Tetra,
Part of-
you want to say something?
Yeah, part of what we talked to, and again, to emphasize what Mark said, is that this is not an ownership change, so much as the majority owners are kind of flexing their muscle to provide the direction and move this project forward. They reached out to us in early December on this, and are taking steps in that direction since then. Importantly, I think economic development has also been one of those departments we've talked about making, kind of beefing up, and so we can support Mark in his efforts to promote Fairfield, promote our commercial base, and make sure we stay in the public eye in that garden. In fact, Mr. Walsh, I think you and I have had some conversations along those lines. So this is kind of our continuation of our process in terms of moving that forward with some planning, addressing one of the strategic weaknesses that we identified, which is the sewer system on the eastern side of town, and making sure that has the capacity we need to continue our development in this section.
Any other questions on this or on the budget as a whole? We'll go to Mr. Becker. Thank you, Mr. Tetro.
Well, yeah, so I understand what you guys are doing. Obviously, you're doing this over at the Metro Center. And I understand, reaching out, trying to coordinate on a construction type related project. I get the hand holding kind of with the businesses, which is obviously between you guys and the chamber. We see a lot there. That's important. But where are you guys at when it comes to trying to get businesses to take a look at coming into Fairfield from who knows where? I mean, many states away, and then trying to line them up perhaps with developers, or trying to get developers even, to sort of eye Fairfield. Because other than there are some projects, but we look at the scale of the Metro Center, and you say, well, where else are you going to go and do it? And first thing that pops into my mind is what they're doing in the center of Westport. Nobody in a million years probably would have thought that there would be private-public land swaps and building swaps and new components and revitalization all sort of in there. And it's amazing. I'm sure it was years in the works by many people to kind of pull all that off. But I say to myself, looking at Fairfield and looking at kind of what we have, when's it coming here, on that, potentially that scale, in the areas that people, and I know that there's a lot going on in our town, and that's good, but on that scale, and in a way, what seemed unique with that is a lot of people, I think, kind of just went by all that and never thought that something like that big would really sort of take place. And in a way, also, that I think when your finished product is done, no one goes, totally destroyed the character, it's some massive thing. And I would guess it's going to, it will be a big revenue generator. It'll be a really good thing for their residents and probably ours that are going to drive down there too. But I'd love to kind of understand that whole
There's
other
a-
side and what you guys are doing to sort of get there for us.
Couple observations or responses to that. First, it's interesting, I appreciate what Westport is doing, and what's interesting to me, too, from that perspective, the comparison is that frequently the folks from Westport are coming up here and asking what's the secret to our sauce in terms of what we're doing in downtown Fairfield, and how can they replicate that there. And I kid you not, I've had at least 3 different delegations from Westport approach me and talk to me at length about the different things that Fairfield has done to facilitate downtown revitalization. But to your other point, what you need in order for those development projects to go forward is you have to have, a willing owner and developer that's willing and financing, obviously, to do that in a market that would support that type of development. So the biggest issue that we have for some of those are the ownership of the existing parcels is not in a, how can I say this politely, but they're not interested in doing those types of projects. We don't control those sites. The town, we don't control the sites. The town doesn't control those sites. So as much as we can do in terms of attracting business to town or working with developers, and I've been working with numerous developers looking to aggregate parcels to facilitate exactly that type of redevelopment on scale, because that's what you need because of the underlying cost of the land. You need to develop projects at scale to make the numbers work. Frankly, the big issue has been the ownership of the existing parcels. They're not inclined to sell, or they're not inclined to entertain those types of development. And we've had a couple of, we've had some interest in parcels downtown that would be along those lines, probably at a slightly smaller, reduced scale, because we just don't have the mass, but we continue to do those things, more so with developers or development entities that are looking to develop in town. The town is a very attractive place in many respects to do this. I mean, there's a strong underlying value in this community that people appreciate, the development community appreciates. So there's no shortage of interest. It's sometimes coming up with the right opportunities. I do think that there are a couple of key parcels downtown. Again, you need to aggregate property for the most part to develop the type of scale you're looking at to facilitate redevelopment. And most of the opportunities we see here is largely infill, but Commerce Drive is the same case. You don't have large lots, so you end up having to piece together 2 or 3 parcels, frequently under different ownership, is not owned by the same entity, and so their disposition to that type of deal may be different. But I'm working with 2 different development groups right now on in the Commerce Drive area. They're seeing what's happening around Fairfield Metro. The proximity to the train is clearly a key driving point, and so there is interest in that area as there is downtown. So we'll continue to work on that. On the business attraction standpoint, there's no. We frequently get our leads mainly from the state, or from that. If we're going to, we don't have the resources, and nothing in this budget would change that in terms of our ability to go really out of state to attract companies from even nearby, New York, Massachusetts, to come to Fairfield. We really need to, again, work with our partners. We're part of a larger region, and frequently businesses that are considering an out-of-state move are looking not at a specific town at that level, they're looking at a region or a state, and then they're narrowing down, and we want to be part of that conversation, and we frequently are, to the extent to which that's even occurring. But, frequently, it's really, we have to partner with the state and our regional partners, including utility companies, to put ourselves in front of the site selectors and others that are looking to do those types of things. So that, I guess that's a long-winded answer to your question, but
Yeah, thank you. And I'm not
If I might add on a bit to that, because I think that Mark is not doing himself a service. He's doing a phenomenal amount of work for as limited a department, as limited resources as we give him. He doesn't have a big staff. If you go out and look at other towns, they have larger staffs in economic development than we do here. And yet we've still seen, certainly FTC has put a couple $1 million into that and made a major difference downtown. There is a question of timing. And as much as Westport is doing their renovation downtown now, Cleveland's did ours a few years ago. And we had been the envy of Westport for having that done. We just did it first in that regard. In terms of attracting more businesses here, one of the opportunities, or one of the obstacles is we actually need more space. We need more building. That's what Exide's going to provide. That's what Metro is going to provide. And specifically, that's what the most recent groundbreaking we went to over on Commerce Drive was, a groundbreaking for a 130,000 square foot building that is going up and should be done within the next year, mixed use, and being a big anchor component to that. Our strategic plan is certainly helping to address some of the direction, both the long-range plan that economic development is doing, but also the overall strategic plan we're doing for the town to help address that direction. And certainly in terms of the amount of activity, I did my best to highlight a lot of that during the state of the town and listed quite a few projects that were underway to show that kind of development going on continually here in Fairfield.
So, speaking of just kind of the numbers, do we know yet, has anybody calculated what the vacancy rate will be when GE is gone? And is there a concern that that's going to kind of create a perception, like in a negative way or anything like that? Or is that, it's the way numbers can be. Sometimes it's thrown out there, sometimes it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Will people sort of, has there been any feedback? They just kind of get that that's GE doing its thing and it's going to be all right on our end, or?
Well, I think the Cleveland proposal went a long way to helping address that in terms of providing a future and an opportunity for up there. And
if your question is from the local real estate, commercial real estate sector, I mean, it's clearly a concern. It's out there in terms of GE relocation, but I think we're beyond the initial shock and disappointment, if you will. I mean, so I don't think we're not seeing a deleterious impact in terms of building activity. As Selectman Timniak pointed out, there's quite a bit of activity in town, and we certainly are not seeing a decrease in the level of interest from businesses looking at Fairfield. The issue is oftentimes a question of timing and matching up a business's specific needs with available properties, and that sometimes is a tricky thing. Currently we don't have much in the way of vacancy. That it's about 10% across retail and office sectors. It's very low compared to other parts of the county. That's obviously going to increase if you throw 500,000 square feet into the mix. But it's not, I've heard, I think Mr. Mayor asked me and said it was like 75% vacancy. No, it's not going to be anywhere like that. No, that's not what I said. Okay. You were quoting somebody else.
Yeah, there are people, and we actually did run that calculation, and the change just isn't as dramatic as.
Or we go to about 30.
What is the change?
I've been trying to remember it since Dave asked the question, and I'm just not.
I think it was it was in the 30% range.
Yeah.
I mean, it's significant. I mean, that would be very high
You're not
vacancy
minimizing
rates.
it, right.
So I'm not minimizing by any stretch. It's a significant component of our office market.
Well, and plus, it's 30% of the existing office market, plus you're trying to get Metro Center built out.
Correct.
So it adds
Right.
a difficulty there.
Correct.
Yeah, two different markets, though. In Metro Center, they're talking about a mixed-use development there, and they're talking about, little as Mark mentioned earlier, lining up some of their clients, that one of their rationales and one of their points of enthusiasm for the project is they have great contacts within the retail world to bring that in and get that started. On the GE property side, I know the Clevelands are already out talking to players that may come in, so if they're able to complete the transaction, which we may not know for another year, they would still be in the, they move very fast at filling that up, and I know they've been reaching out to specific people already to do that. So it's not like we're going to see 500,000 square feet come on the market for lease and hit the market at any one point. First of all, the Clebands are our number one taxpayer without the GE deal. Part of their interest is certainly protecting their investment in Fairfield, and they wouldn't do that to their own market.
Thank you, Mr. Tetro. Any other questions on this budget? Mr. Walsh? and
Well, I
then Mr.
presume on the
Hopkins.
GE project, there's going to not only be the Clebands, that's the only one in the paper. I think any commercial developer would probably be looking at that property. I don't think Mr. Cinto would not be looking at that property.
I don't mean to suggest
I would
that
hope that he would
yeah.
be, and others would be coming forward as well, which, I guess we'll have to see what the price is and what GE wants, and it's their property, and even though their statement said that they needed the money to buy the Boston and build Boston out and all that other stuff, people make decisions and change and give it to a charity. So, I mean, it could be, anything can happen. I guess we'll have to see. My bigger concern, which is, I guess, you've addressed somewhat tonight, Mark, is what I bring up every budget season. It just seems like these budget seasons roll by quicker because I feel like I just asked you the question 2 weeks ago, which was about the Metro Center. And while I know that square footage of the millions plus square feet of development, I think 800 was supposed to be for office, and the other was supposed to be for other types of development, including the depot that was supposed to have retail in it and whatever. While the facility is not built and technically we don't have that area not rented, in my head it's not rented because I went along with that plan when we voted for it, and we still don't get, other than I guess they probably pay real estate taxes on the land.
They do, and as the land got cleaned up, their taxes went up, so yes.
But we're just not seeing the revenue that was promised, meaning that we delivered what we were supposed to deliver as a town, plus, Mr. Tetro and I were on the Board of Selectmen at the time, plus paid more money than we thought we were going to pay for the cleanup that they would not contribute to as a partner. The state paid a lot more money than they thought and delivered what they were supposed to do. And now this just sits fallow. And I think I asked you this either last year or 2 years ago, is there, and Mike, chime in if is there any thought to, I know the developer's starting to come with other ideas to you guys and whatever, is there any thought process of maybe increasing your budget and hiring some commercial real estate people to meet with the town and say, okay, to the developer, I know what you guys are trying to do, but this is what maybe we think is best for the town, meaning that they want to seem to change this, not have 800,000 square feet because it's not the market anymore, and they don't think they can sell it, and they won't build a building until they get it all fully rented and all these other things that they chose not to talk about at the time. But they might come to us, you're saying retail, are you talking big box retail? Because I thought that was strictly
It's not,
forbidden
not
at the
currently permitted, so some,
It's
yeah.
strictly
They're-
forbidden, actually, in the document. It
Yeah,
says
no.
no big box.
Right.
Right, but no, they're talking about, you raised several points there. One is that pretty much everybody that I've talked to about the site has said the 1 million square feet commercial development just isn't going to fly in this market.
Mhm.
And as we look at developments in other areas, that's not what they're doing. It's a lot more along the mixed-use line. So they're coming up with an approach on mixed use being retail, commercial, and residential. That, just as stated, without, pretty much any other details, needs a zone change.
Mhm.
So part of what the plan is, as we've talked to them, we said, look, if you want a zone change, you've got to put together an education component of your approach to educate the community, educate the stakeholders around you, but also educate the community at large why that is, what the market's changed, what you're proposing, and what the impact on the town is.
I guess my question is, I guess my point is that maybe it's time that we start hiring our own person, so that when they come to us, we can actually go to them and say, this is what we're seeing. We understand the market's changed. We don't want to have a lot of services, town services, increase because of your problem. Because you know what? We already gave you a ton of money by doing what the town was supposed to do. So this deal has been, so far, on the books right now. I think over time, it'll always be looked at as a good deal. But right now, where we stand, we're in a negative position. So the last thing I want to do is add a large residential component, even if it's mixed use, so that I have to have more police, more fire, maybe a substation over there of some sort, and all this other stuff. Maybe we want to figure out what we think in this marketplace best benefits the town and said, and this way, when they come to us, say, if you want us to support this, we want the project to go more in this way. As opposed to sitting there waiting for them to come and say, we want retail, we want 300 units of residential. It might just be put at the town, to spend some money and get a consultant to start saying, what do we want as opposed to what do they want? Because you know what? They've gotten what they wanted the entire time. And they got, when extra money was needed for environmental cleanup of those sands and other things, they held us to the agreement and said, you know what? Even though we're a tri-party agreement and we're all partners, we're not going to pony it up the extra money. We'll leave it to the town and the state to pony that up. So I'm just saying that I would support or some plan to start thinking about having the town get a consultant to figure out and work with Mark and with your office, Mike, and even have TPZ input. What does the town really want there that we think is going to work for us too, as opposed to what's going to economically work best for this developer who has not really played ball and done what I think they were supposed to have done and not shown the financial wherewithal to actually spend any dollars until dollars go into their pocket.
Yeah, I think that's philosophically, that's one of the changes with the I'm going to say new leadership. We know it's the different people sitting in different chairs. That they're not, it's not, we'll wait for the big client. It's like, let's go out, let's get things started, let's build it, and then fill it. So that's what got me excited about the approach and then moving forward.
And that's a better approach, but I still think we're going to have to start thinking about what's best for the town as opposed to what's best for this developer.
There's two components to what you're saying,
Yeah.
and you're not off base at all in that respect. I think I have a fairly good sense working with the commercial brokerage and realty firms that I do in terms of what the market currently supports, what you're likely to see as uses for the site. What Mr. Tetro is saying in terms of mixed use, in terms of residential or retail, some office component, those are all supportable by the current market environment that we find ourselves in. And not all retail or not all residential is created equal in terms of the net tax benefits, if you will, the rateable to the town and the impact in terms of community services. So there's some that obviously produce a much higher valuation and have less impact on community services than others. But the devil's always in the details. So there's two pieces to that, and part of that is something we have talked to the state about in terms of looking at both a market analysis, which would have overlap to the GE site, because part of it is understanding what the market, I think I have an understanding, but it doesn't hurt to have an expert going out there and also articulating that in some fashion and putting more quantitative analysis associated with that. And the second piece is more of a fiscal impact analysis and looking at both the cost as well as the benefits to the community in terms of the proposed uses. And to some extent, you really and I've talked to a couple consulting firms about that. And one approach is to have it on an on-call relationship, because part of what you're looking at is it's tough to do a fiscal impact analysis on something that's not well defined. So once you have something defined, then you can look at specific elements of that and determine what the impacts are to the community, both from a plus side as well as a negative side. So I think jury's still out, the devil's always in the details, but I don't think you're mistaken. And we've had conversations with the state in terms of, certainly in light of the GE decision, what we might anticipate in the way of assistance from the state that could help look at, not just that area, but a TOD site like Fairfield Metro.
Okay. I want to go to Mrs. Leclerc. She had a comment on this, and then Mr. Hopkins, I didn't forget you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention what Jim is suggesting, one property in town that worked exactly that way, and that was the Fairpreen property, and they originally came back a couple times for zone changes, and they met with the neighbors and worked out what would fit in that property, and I think it's a great piece of property now, and it's very active.
Yeah, that definitely was was a case where the community obviously articulated what they had in terms of a vision for the site. I don't think there was a whole lot of market analysis that went into it. It happened to work out okay for all parties. But there wasn't really a substantive market analysis or fiscal impact analysis associated with that. So that would be my only cautionary tale with regard to it. Was everyone said it would be great to have these types of uses, and the developer tried a couple times to get something else approved, didn't, and he just made lemonade out of lemons. So, and it worked out, but it's kind of happenstance. So, I love it when it all works out in the end, but sometimes you need more of a definitive plan.
I think along those lines, when we talk about an education component up front as part of the it's not going to just come out, go to zoning, and be voted up or down. The idea is to have a series of public hearings to engage the community, to let the community know what's going on, so we can see what the impact is, and potentially at that point buy us the time to bring somebody in to review that based on what's taken place.
I think it also benefits the developer in terms of building a case potentially. If it's well supported, we'll be able to demonstrate what the benefits are to the town.
But our hook really is that they're going to need a zone change.
Yep.
So
I want to go to Mr. Hopkins, who's been very polite and patient. Thank you, sir.
I want to ask about, do you have any involvement or is there any activity going on concerning getting a new tenant into the IGA building on Stratfield Road?
On and off. We've had some promising leads, but they have tended to evaporate. We're following up one right now that has some potential, but it's a site. Walgreens was at some point motivated, obviously, to cut their losses, so they were willing to do it. And the issue now is there's not enough on the original lease term such that somebody's going to make the investment necessary for that 10,000 square foot building without a lease extension, which involves the landlord. And the landlord has proven a little bit difficult to deal with. So we've attempted to engage them directly. With the last major deal that imploded, we had some fairly in-depth conversations with all parties. It's definitely something we're continuing to market and work with the brokerage community to see if we can find. We work with the neighborhood too, and the neighborhood seems generally receptive to a number of ideas that may have not been as great early on, but
I think that is my area of town. I can tell you, I think people would be very receptive to getting anything in there. Is the problem lack of, well, how much is left on the lease term?
It's, I think there was a 20-year lease. I'm thinking it's like about 10 years into it, yeah. So the numbers they were looking at for the daycare was such that they needed a 20-year term. So they wanted a direct lease. At that time, they had a little more. And that was the issue. And then the issue came up in terms of interior asbestos and other remediation issues. The more recent one, obviously that's now well established, so that's part of it. The ones that are really interesting, I think the neighborhood would really like, are ones that are difficult to put together because somebody has to take a master lease and then sublet the space, because 10,000 square feet's a lot. And it's just, it works for like a Walgreens or something like that, but, a small independent firm, it's really a lot. So we're trying to break up the space, but Walgreens won't deal with multiple leases, and I don't blame them, so that's been the catch.
But it's really between Walgreens and whoever's going to sublet it right now, right? I mean, really the actual
That's the
owner's
first
out
step.
of it.
Yeah, the first step
If you
is
need more than 10 years to justify your...
Typically.
If you need more than 10 years, but, I mean, technically right now it would be between Walgreens
Yes, that's
and
our first
Rutledge.
conversation with it was with Walgreens and their broker, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? The follow-up on one item that Mr. Walsh was speaking of before, I do agree with him, and I know that there's a lot of hard work going on at the Metro Center. I do agree that we got to think outside the box, right? An example of that, and I only know this from my own personal experience at having to go up there all the time, is Marlborough, Massachusetts, with a private developer. I don't know the details of it. They actually built something like 6 or 7 sheets of ice up there for hockey. And what developed was something like 6 or 7 hotels and tons of restaurants. And they fill up that place, you know, from Thursday through Sunday, every week, all year, with thousands of people. And they drive that traffic to their hotels and restaurants and the community by having it there. Now, I'm not advocating that, no. but I'm saying you get a facility there, right on the side of 95, right between New York and Boston, easy access, easy to find, you know, with all the restaurants, 2 colleges, high schools, you know, all this kind of stuff. I'm not advocating that.
No, I know
specific
you're
thing.
not. You're using it as an example, not to suggest that we're trying to replicate what was done successfully there. But, yeah,
You know.
I'm in the, I learned a long time ago that no idea is crazy until proven such. So we get a number of very interesting concepts, and what we've done at Metro in particular is put them in touch with the right people and suggest that they have a conversation about it. And they do have a conversation. If it works out, the numbers work, and there's interest, then we go forward with something.
Yeah, something like that drives traffic into the community, into our local businesses, as opposed to residences, which, to Mr. Walsh's point and others, you know, you have to deal with not just the safety issues and the public safety issues, which we'll probably have to deal with anyway, no matter what you build there, and we knew that going in, but you have to deal with the school issues and et cetera in that area.
Again, I would say it depends on the residential, because some residential can certainly drive commercial use as well.
And I think that the residential is definitely targeted at units focused, the discussions have been around units focused at seniors or millennials that don't have the kids.
Yeah, I think one of the smart things that TP&Z did when they did the TOD overlay, which doesn't apply to the Fairfield Metro Center site, but the TOD overlay zone there puts a premium on small unit size. So if you want to maximize your unit count, you're doing small bedrooms, 1-bedroom studio apartments to maximize that. So there's a real incentive to develop small units, which typically don't bring kids.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate the discussion. Any other comments, thoughts on this budget? Anything from the public? Mr. Barnhart, seeing none, have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to go to the last budget of the night, which is the Harbor Management Commission. This budget is flat. Do we have any questions, comments, or concerns on this budget? Hello there, sir.
Jim Harmon. I'm the chairman of the Harbor Management Commission. I'd be delighted to extend this meeting by answering all of your questions.
I think you're going to extend it minimally. But thank you for being here and waiting patiently into the night. Any questions, comments, concerns on the budget? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Have a good night. All right, that's the end of our agenda for this evening. Mr. Mayor has a brief update to give us on the refinance. Mr. Mayor, can you make it brief, and please give us that?
Yes, the refinance, Piper Jaffray was chosen as the underwriter. We had the Moody's call yesterday, and the underwriter's due diligence yesterday. We anticipate the Moody's results to come back on Monday, or no, tomorrow, yeah, Monday, right, thank you. We anticipate no problems in that area. Pricing will take place a week from today, Wednesday the 23rd. Due to the movement in interest rates, the size of the deal has gone from about $30 million down to about $22 million. Obviously, we could pick up some of that if interest rates were to reverse and go the other way again. The end.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, before we release tonight, a programming reminder. This Saturday, March 19th, at 9:30 a.m. at the Fairfield Ludlow High School Auditorium, the Board of Finance will host a public budget comment session. This is our opportunity to hear directly from the public on any and all thoughts related to the budget. We may or may not opine at that meeting. Usually we get some good turnouts. It depends on the year and the increase or what's going on with the budget. Hopefully we'll get a turnout on Saturday morning. Next week, we have meetings on Monday, the 21st. We have the library, the tax collector, information technology, and the not-for-profit organizations. Remember, the not-for-profit organizations, we do not request them to make presentations. They come in attendance. We flip through the book. If there's any questions of those not-for-profits, we ask them that evening. And for that meeting, and finally, on Tuesday, March 22nd, there's no public comment. This is Board of Finance only. The Board of Selectmen obviously may appear as ex officio. This is a public executive budget session where we discuss what our observations are in the budget. It is also our opportunity, if we choose in advance, to ask any department heads to be here for follow-up questions. So if any of that, if there are any follow-up questions, anything that we're not getting, two things I would ask. Please send an email directly to myself and Mr. Mayor. And please make sure you copy Mr. Mayor so we can follow up on that, particularly if you have a department head that you would like to answer any questions at that meeting. Do I have any questions, comments, or concerns from board members related to the process moving forward? Okay, the Board of Selectmen has a meeting on the 28th of the month, and then they vote. I believe your vote is on the 29th. Is that correct, Mike? Thank you. And then we, of course, will vote on Thursday, March 31st. And there'll be no public comment that night.
And who brings the coffee and donuts that night again?
I believe that's you. You get off easy. All right.
Former board member.
Yes. Any questions, comments, concerns, any issues, any follow-up items at this point? I'd like to thank you all, wish you all a happy St. Patrick's Day, and I'll see many of you on Saturday morning. Do we have a motion to adjourn? We'll take Mr. Hopkins with his new nameplate, seconded by Mr. DeWitt. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? We're done, everybody. Good night.